I'm focused on his spirit cause it keeps me from his fire. The Holy Ghost was with me, so my fear I leave behind. My sins were all diminished when he took that breath and died. And if you think I'ma give up on my God, the devil is a lie. The devil is a lie. The devil is a lie.
Hello, this is Christina Abrego. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr. And today we're going to be talking about, continue talking about this immigration case with this man, Garcia, who was deported because there is proof of life. The senator was able to find him and sit down with him. And maybe they think that's a great optics win for them. I don't think it is, because I think the mystery of frankly, whether he was alive was like, dang, is a bit concerning. So now I'm like, oh, he's fine. he's fine and he's home where he belongs. So the White House is trolling them and putting out different things. So I want to talk about that continued story. Also, I want to touch on a debate between Charlie Kirk and this young man, Hayden Rodia. He has a growing, I guess he's got more subs than I do. So he's got a decent page on YouTube where he debates, and he's a pretty wise young man. So he I don't know if he's from Michigan or he just traveled up to see Charlie Kirk, but apparently Charlie Kirk was in Michigan doing one of his tours. I probably maybe wanted to go up there if I had been paying attention, I guess, and chit-chatted a bit, but he confronted him on his position on abortion and the culpability of women on it. And so they had an interesting conversation, and I want to go ahead and talk about it and critique it and watch it a bit. So I do have one side who I sway toward, and I'll talk about how I think they did and in the debate. So anyway, we'll talk about that and some other things. But before we jump into it, I want to encourage you guys, not the illegal again. Yeah, they found him. So he's alive. we won't touch on it that long. But before we jump into it, I want to encourage you guys to go to blackteanews.com, check out different content, website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do, please consider leaving a donation on the website, because it does cost to stream, run my site, all that good stuff. So you guys can support. I very much appreciate you guys. I also encourage you guys to check out my different books that I have available on Amazon. There's a link that'll take you to a description. Well, a list of my books where you guys can find out more, but I have 18 altogether, which you guys know that. I'll be in Motor City Comic Con in May, so that will be cool. I'll be in Artist Alley, so if any of you are in the area, I hope to see you guys then. Okay, I hope you guys are planning to have a good weekend, and hopefully in church. It's Good Friday and then Easter. And usually, if there's a time of year where people don't normally go to church, this is like the weekend or Christmas time. Usually people will go make their yearly appearance, I guess. But y'all know I'm there every week. Yeah. So today is Good Friday. So assuming we'll have a good service and all that stuff. So I don't think I have any plans other than that. Just to work. And anyway, let's talk about this guy. So yesterday we went over some stories, some new information. There was a report that broke out that he was stopped for allegedly trafficking people, had some people that they suspected of, I guess, being illegal. He's transporting people from Texas to Maryland, and he was driving without a valid driver's license. I don't know why you're able to just get away with that. You know, people get in trouble all the time for not having licenses or insurance or things like that, and people take the car and you can't drive or whatever. But they called the FBI, still under Biden at that time. Christopher Wray was ahead at the time, and I don't know why they said to drop it. I'm still waiting for new information to come out about why they dropped it, but there was that information. We also went over the fact that his wife, who's, you know, been all stand by your man, I want him home, and they, you know, there's kiddos and other stuff, so like I understand wanting him home, but it's been reported that she put out a protective order against him and wrote that he was abusive in there and described some things that he did to her. So she was actually interviewed on Good Morning America about it by Strahan, who people like to invoke when they don't like me, and they're like, she's got a gap, call her Strahan. And I'm like, okay. So his gap clearly has not hindered his life in any sort of way. So okay. But there's a little tidbit of information for you guys. It's usually Strahan or Stacey Abrams, and I'm like, oh, we don't look alike. We just have this gap. Like, it's not a big deal. But he did ask her about it, and she didn't know what to say. I don't know why nobody prepped her. She's obviously she wants her husband home or her man home. So I get that, but she's got to have like people advising her and prepping her. So this was awkward to say the least.
I have to ask it. You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
Husband is alive. That's all I can say.
Okay, and I'm not going to push on that apparently. But how much hope?
Well, you're not going to push on that, sir. I congratulate him for asking the question. So I guess there's that. I guess I can congratulate him for at least asking the question, because if you were a journalist and she came on the program and that news is floating around and it's hot stuff, it'd be shady if you didn't ask that really relevant question. She obviously doesn't want to answer it. I think he should have at least pressed her at least one time, you know, one follow-up after that. You know, Dana Bash, she was talking about her interview with Kamala Harris and some of the questions that she asked and how some things she didn't answer or wasn't as direct. And so Dana Bash was like, I've learned that if you're interviewing somebody, you know, you can do a follow-up and maybe ask like one other time. But if they're not answering the question after like 2 times, and they're not going to answer the question. Now she's like pressed other people very hard compared to how she pressed Kamala Harris, but you know, she did ask like a follow-up or so. So I think he should have at least follow up. But if it's true, it's just true. And you could say he's a changed man, you know, by the grace of God or something. Like at the time we were going through a rough patch, but that doesn't change the fact that, you know, he's still a husband and he's still a father. And you know, he wasn't treated justly in the eyes of the law. And, you know, I would like that to be made right. Just something along those lines. And she totally blew that. People are saying, I don't think she cares for her husband. She's just getting paid. You know, this is such a bad person to advocate for the Democrats. I mean, if you feel that due process wasn't done correctly and it needs to apply for everyone correctly and everyone needs justice, even folks you don't like, you know, and you want to just make sure that you're following your principles, then that's one thing. But sometimes you do shop around for the right kind of advocate. You know, I think Rosa Parks was the first person who didn't want to move on a bus. You know, there's certain people who you just kind of shop around for, so they'll be a good advocate for your cause to advance your political agenda. And this guy, the more that we find out about him, it's just a hot mess for Democrats. It just really, really is. So he's a wife beater. She didn't deny it. She didn't bother making excuses or whatever. She didn't say he's a change man, all that other stuff. She just said, I just want home. You know, and just let that be that. So that not a good look. Not a good look. Okay? So he's safe. And you had a Democrat who went down to see him. And this post is from End Wokeness. Democrats refuse to stand for Lake and Riley, but fly to greet an MS-13 illegal domestic abuser. That's the contrast. That's the contrast that they have going on here. And I mentioned it the other day, and I keep thinking about it. I'm like, misplaced priorities. Or how people see, like, how you're willing to treat the criminal or the illegal or whatever over American citizens, and how much you guys care about those causes rather than people who are struggling, or in this case, people who are murdered. It just makes people hate you or people, I hate's a strong word. I don't hate anybody, but have just such anger, like righteous fury toward a lot of these folks, and people get sick of them. Like if you go back to the ad, Trump is for us, she's for they them, and how that really impacted the election. That's one of their most effective ads about the transgender stuff. Now, people have been hearing about this stuff for a while. People have been hearing about boys competing in girls sports and them losing out on scholarships or whatever. They've been seeing more people pop up in pop culture who are transgender, it being in the schools. You know, it's been a topic of discussion for a while. But the reason why it drummed up so much outrage toward the election, particularly with this ad, is that because a lot of people are like, I think it's weird, but it's you live your life, you do you, or whatever, you know, it's not hurting me, go on. And as it progressed more and started to infiltrate, like, well, you have to refer to us this way, we have to police your speech, I need you to actually affirm me and believe this, that started getting on people's nerves. But it still wasn't as extreme enough for the pendulum to swing until you found out that she wanted to give people who were detained, illegal aliens who were detained, to access and money spent by the taxpayers to affirm their gender identity stuff. So if you're talking about paying for trans surgeries for illegal detainees or whatever, or hormones or whatnot, that is a bridge too far. And it's not like she checked that off in a box. She took the time to write that stuff out. So yes, Charlemagne, you know, from the Breakfast Club is like, I don't want my money going to something like that. I'm sure he pays a lot of taxes. You know, he's a wealthy guy. Lots of people who spend a lot of money on their taxes. You know, we just had our tax day. I assume, you know, some of you had a hefty penny to pay or a small penny to pay, or, you know, but you still had to pay unless you got stuff back because you overpaid. That's why you get stuff back, you know. So people are concerned that their money was spent to this, and they can't pay for their groceries, or it's very hard to pay for their groceries. They're, you know, for their kids' clothes, for, travel gas, like all kinds of different stuff that just makes life really hard compared to how it was. And you're telling me that it's a priority of yours to spend taxpayer money to pay for people who shouldn't be in the country, but to affirm their delusion about something that they can never be. That's when people's minds were like exploding. It's not just the fact that people are into the pretend, make believe stuff. It was a misplaced priority for the Democrats. And since it's on video, or she wrote it down, and there's people talking about it on CNN and the Breakfast Club, and then there's videos of her talking about wanting to pay for prisoners to get their sex gender reassigned or whatever. You couldn't just ignore it when they're playing it repeatedly. So it's the thing about the misplaced priorities. Okay? RC said if they ran the Republican Party, they would make an ad. They're definitely going to make ads about this. And I can only imagine. I don't know if he's the senator who went is up for re-election. But here's a but they should run those ads for sure. They should run those ads. But here's the thing about this though. About 2 days ago, I was having a conversation about this, and someone had called me and they're like, did you hear about the story? I mean, it was a few more than 2 days ago, but did you hear about the story? I'm like, yeah, I saw some stuff about it. And they're like, they sent this guy and they're trying to get him back. And they're saying, the president's saying, no, they're not going to send him back. And they're like, I think he's dead. And I'm like, oh snap, what if he is dead? Oh my. Oh gosh, that'd be really bad if he's dead. They're like, oh my gosh. So, oh my gosh. Well, he's not dead. So to me, that lingering, and I was looking at different comments today and videos, and like, well, I thought he was dead. That's what some people were thinking. So them not saying we're not going to release them. And at first there were stories that they were going to refuse, the senators or whoever who were going to come down to see him. So it seemed like people had something to hide about his well-being. But now we know that's not the case. So those unanswered questions were worse than these answers we're getting. So I'm like, oh, okay, he's alive and he's home and he's away from the wife that he beat. It sounds like a win to me. Okay. So I don't think these optics are good for them. I don't think these optics are good for them. And this is from the White House's page. Like the White House right here. They said, fixed it for you, New York Times. Oh, and by the way, Chris Van Hollen, who's the senator from Maryland, who went to go see him, he's not coming back. Now, just on a side note, I do feel that these are the sort of things that should be tweeted out by personal people, campaign stuff, maybe Trump, even the Trump War Room or something. The official White House page on X, I know there's a lot of people who like their memes and want them to tell folks off, but I don't want this to be an administration. It's a real administration. And I sort of think that, Trump posts wild stuff on X all the time. He could have just, or not X, but Truth Social. He could have tweeted this out 3 a.m. or something, but I don't love that this came out from the White House. But with that being said, let's look at it. Senator meets with wrongly, they crossed that out, deported Maryland man. They crossed it out, said MS-13 illegal alien in El Salvador who is never coming back. Who is never coming back. I also don't know if that's great while they're litigating the case with the judge as well, because they are supposed to be facilitating him coming back. So if he did come back, they could be like, and if he comes back, we're just going to detain him because he's an illegal alien. So he's not going to be roaming around free, could be the attitude. So I don't love this personally. If it was from, a meme page or something, that'd be great. I don't know about the White House. Maybe you guys feel differently. Uh there's lots of takers. They could have told Benny Johnson or somebody to tweet it out or whatever. They also had another one, We Are Not the Same, where we watched this video from this mother who lost her daughter, who was brutally killed and raped by an illegal alien. And she's from Maryland. And she called out Senator Holland, for never reaching out to her. But he flew to El Salvador to see this man. Thank you for proving he's alive. It's a little, stress off my life, I guess, because I'm like, man, what if this guy is really dead? That's going to be like terrible. So glad we have the proof of life. But this optic isn't good for the Democrats. I don't think so at all. I do not think so at all. So RC didn't think he was dead. I was concerned. And then it's like people were making stories about him being tortured in like some kind of hellhole, And it looks bright and sunny, and they're sitting down there. It just, if they were just trying to make it seem like they're keeping him in some kind of torture dungeon. No, he looks like he's home. He looks safe. Nobody broke his bones. He didn't get stabbed. Didn't look like he got, folded over and, penetrated or something in the prison. Like it did. He looks okay. So the exaggerations that they were just, pushing it, they just, their fantastical nonsense was just fantastical nonsense. Anyway, I also want to talk about, before I get to the Charlie Kirk video that I wanted to look at, I wanted to touch on this whole propaganda regarding women and the SAVE Act, and the Democrats trying to push this idea that Republicans are making it harder for married women to vote, because in order to get like the real ID or whatever that you need, you need to have proper identification. If you change your name, it's different than your birth certificate or whatever, you need some proof to why your name has changed. I don't know why you wouldn't have your documents. Things can happen, fires or whatever, but it's possible to obviously go and get new documents, from your local clerk's office or whatever. But like all you would really need in that situation is your marriage license, your marriage certificate, and that would prove why your name is different to get that ID. So it's not rocket science. It's a different stance in the, like, they used to have the stance of like black people are too dumb and poor to know where the Secretary of State office is, so they can go DMV or whatever to go get their driver's license. And now it's married women are too stupid to go have identification to prove who they are to be able to properly vote. It's nonsense. And I was really thinking about it today, because I saw this clip about how when you look at the white demographic and DEI, it's really just college educated white women that are so off step from basically all the rest of the white people. So I'm gonna play this clip from I think this is I don't think this is CNN, but
asked about in our poll, we had two blind see this. White women with at least a college.
Sorry, it looks like it's NBC.
See this. white women with at least a college degree, the only group of white voters that really kind of is on the left politically, aligned with progressive causes, democratic politics. Give you an example here. It's that DEI question, right here that we asked about in our poll. We had two big statements we read to voters. Basically, do you want to continue DEI programs or do you think they should be ended? And again, look at this divide here. White men, no degree, end it. White men with a degree, end it, they say. White women, no degree, end it, they say, by double digits. And then white women with a college degree, completely different by a nearly 40-point margin, they say, to continue DEI. See this.
So white women, college educated white women, and that doesn't mean just because you're college educated that you're not an idiot, because there's a lot of educated fools out there. Many of them are indoctrinated, that are off step and want like the DEI, and they're just and are disapproving of Trump, because that was the first number two that they showed, opinion of Trump. So it's really these white women, the college educated white women, that are so off the mark or whatever. and that's the area where Kamala did well, with those college educated white women, and of course like black women or whatever. But I'm in a very small percentage of like the number of black people has of Republican support or Trump support has grown or whatever, but the black women is still like very small. We're talking like, I don't know, 8%, if that. So I'm in a very, very small demographic. But if Republicans were trying to keep married women from voting, my question for you all and the people who could possibly believe that is, why would they want to do that? Why would they want to do that? If they were going to keep women from voting, it wouldn't be the married women who they'd want to not vote. It would be the unmarried women. It would be the unmarried women. It would not be. It would be the married women. Like, because I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. The numbers, if you're a married woman, you're more likely to vote Republican. You're more likely to be conservative. And so I had asked Grok. Let me go back to Grok and find it. Because I was trying to find the numbers and stuff. If you try to Google it right now, look up the numbers, the main stuff that you immediately find is like all the stuff on the SAVE Act. But I'm like, I know like off the top of my head that married women more likely vote Republican. But I asked, like, how did married women vote in the 2024 U.S. election? And said in 2024 U.S. presidential election, married women leaned significantly toward the Republican candidate Donald Trump over the Democratic candidate Kamala Harris. Data from various sources indicate the following voting patterns among married women. Overall voting trends: married women favored Trump by a notable margin. Exit polls and surveys suggest that approximately 52% to 56% of married women voted for Trump, compared to 43% to 47% for Harris. This resulted in a lead for Trump among married women of about 5 to 13 percentage points, with specific estimates varying by source. For instance, the AP VoteCast survey reported Trump winning married women by around 7 points, with other analysis, such as those from the Center of American Women in Politics, noted a slightly larger gap. Previous to comparison to previous elections, this trend is consistent with the 2020, where Trump also won a majority of married women, 52%. And he didn't win in 2020. He still got a higher percent. That's just how it is. That's why you see so many left-wing women who will complain about conservative women, and they'll say things like, oh, you're just doing it because your husband told you to. You're just voting because your husband. You don't have your own mind. That's why Democrats were literally airing ads like the husband goes into the voting booth and the wife goes in the voting booth, and they're like, it's private, you can do what you want. And they thought they're reaching out to this secret demographic of women who have just been too weak-willed to be able to go to the privacy of their voting booth to do the right thing because their husband is there. Like, give me a break. Give me a break. My mom, my dad voted for I don't think there's a year he did miss the 2020 election because he was really sick. And he the day after that he went to the hospital. But otherwise, and I'm not sure if he's like really missed like a main election or a midterm election, but he's consistently voted Republican for a long while, at least since the 2000s or whatever. He was a Democrat when I was really young, and then he like switched or whatever. But I remember him. I mean, he voted for Bush both times. For example, he voted for McCain. He voted for Romney, and though Romney and McCain weren't my favorite or whatever, but it is what it is. They were on the ballot, and my mom, she didn't want to vote for McCain. So she left that blank. She didn't want to vote for Obama, but she didn't want to vote for McCain. So she left it blank. And she left it blank because she didn't, I think, didn't think he was like strong enough on the pro-life issue or something like that. I'm not, I guess, I assume, I guess I can't know now, but and I don't think she voted for Romney either. She did vote for Trump. She did vote for George Bush because I remember asking on election day, like, who'd you vote for, Mom? And she just was like, the drunk. Because there was a story that broke about like some of his like youth indiscretions or something, and then I think in his when he was president or something, there was some kind of story about him eating a peanut or whatever and him kind of choking on it. And people were trying to say he was drunk or whatever. But yeah, but she voted for him. So women can make all kinds of decisions. And it's really sexist and demeaning to women to just think that because their husband says one thing, that they're going to vote whatever kind of way. Now, there's some women who don't care too much about politics, and they are going to vote in a way that their husband votes because the husband does care and is following stuff, and they're going to be like, okay, he's been following it. Okay, whatever. I trust him. There's people who call me who are like, who should I vote for? My mom would ask, like, make sure you send me the list of like the local stuff. Like she pays attention to the, she knows who's running for president and so on. But like the really local stuff down to like the school board, she's like, send me a list. And I would make sure she had the list. So she went to to go vote that she'd be able to fill in her complete ballot. So, I mean, sometimes people go by what they're recommended. So there's cases like that, sure. But to just believe that women are so oppressed that you have to advocate in that kind of way, it was really gross. But when Trump won in 2016, Michelle Obama, I don't know if you guys remember this, but she had an interview and she said that women weren't listening to their own voice. Like they voted against their own voice. I'm like, how you know what I sound like? Like we had no conversation. You don't know anything about me, Michelle. You don't know why I voted the way that I voted. And you don't care enough about me to even listen, to even ask the question. And these people will tell you, swear that they are feminists, swear that they care about women and what they think. And it's the Republicans who have the war on women. But when you are married and you start having kids, like Dana Lash, she's a popular radio host. She used to be a spokesperson for the NRA and stuff, but she used to be liberal. She got married. She started having kids. Start looking at the world differently. You have different priorities, and you know, the conservative sort of worldview just sort of makes more sense for how you want to raise your kids and so on. Now, of course, there are people who get married, maybe to a man or a woman or they, them, or poly something. and they have their children and they raise them in all kind of weird ways. I'm not saying that just because you're married or just because you have kids that it's guaranteed that you're going to be right wing. But if we're looking at the numbers, you know, it wouldn't make sense for Republicans to stop married women from voting. If they want to forever win and box out the demographic of women who's not going to vote for them, they'd want to, I guess, box out Black women because that number is tough for them. But the college educated white women, and if you're a college educated white woman, I would assume that you have enough sense to know where your marriage certificate is if anyone wants to marry you at all. Okay. So let's move on. But if anybody does bring up that point to you guys about the SAVE Act and say that Republicans want to stop women from voting, married women from voting, ask them why would they do that? Married women are more likely to vote Republican. It's it's just as simple as that. Anyway, let's move on to this video with Hayden and Charlie Kirk. So Charlie Kirk came to Michigan, and that is where I'm from. I kind of wish I had known, but I guess I don't follow him that closely to stalk where he is or isn't going. But Hayden had this conversation with Charlie Kirk. It's a 5-minute conversation, so we'll it'll maybe take us a minute to get through it if I have a lot of commentary, but I do feel like Hayden hit some good marks, but I'm gonna definitely have some criticism for Kirk here. But they were talking about abortion and who is culpable for it, and I just thought that it was an interesting conversation.
Hi, Charlie. I hope you are doing well.
Hold on.
My name is Hayden. And
Let me refresh it.
Hi, Charlie. I hope you are doing well. My name is Hayden, and I think I can change your mind on an issue in 90 seconds or less.
Wow. Okay.
I'd like to respectfully challenge your view on the moral culpability of mothers and abortion. From what I understand, you view most post-abortive mothers as victims of the abortion industry rather than as murderers themselves. This view concerns me because victims don't need to repent and confess sin, but murderers do, and there's tremendous reason to believe the vast majority of mothers getting abortions are murderers. 91% of women who get abortions are age 20 or older, and 59% have previously given birth at least once. Less than 1% of abortion patients cite their husband, partner, or parents wanting them to have an abortion as their most important reason for having the abortion. A 2011 study of over 15,000 abortions found that 43% of abortion patients chose to view their ultrasound, and 98% of them still proceeded with the abortion. Even in Wisconsin, where there's a 24-hour waiting period, informed consent laws, and mandatory ultrasounds with verbal descriptions of the baby's heartbeat, development, and visible body parts, 89% of women at a Milwaukee clinic still chose to go through with the abortion, with 93% reporting they were the dominant decision maker. All this information supports my view, but is largely unnecessary, since Romans 2 tells us that the law of God is written on every human heart, including those of the women who willingly murdered their children by abortion. If this is not clear evidence that most mothers who procure abortions are guilty of the sin of murder, then what evidence, if any, could I provide to persuade you?
Okay,
So a lot of information thrown into that question, that little speech actually. So it is true that like a lot of people will think about women going and getting abortions and they're like, I know they may have in their mind is like a young teen mom who can't finish high school if she doesn't have an abortion. And I've known women who've had situations like that, or women freshly in college or whatever. or they'll use the, what if the 12-year-old was raped by her uncle, and they'll go to those examples. But the most women who are having abortions are ages 20 to 40. They are grown women. They know what sex does. They know that it results in the baby. It's not out of ignorance. They ought to know about at least protection and stuff, but like 50% of women, it's like half and half of like women who report to have abortions were on some kind of birth control. So half people aren't using it when they get pregnant. And the other half, it's not foolproof. Like, life can still find a way. So a lot of these women are adults. And then there's a large chunk of women who have had children full term who still decide to go ahead and have an abortion. I have heard some stories of some women who have gotten pregnant who, were they didn't get an abortion, but the people around them suggested or asked that if they would. And it should have been so far removed, but it's just, you have to understand, in some communities, and I am talking about the Black community right now, it's so prevalent as just something that is done. And in Michigan, 56% of the abortions, and that's where they are right now, they kill Black children. So it is something that's done mostly by a population that's only 14% of the state. It's very disproportionate. Like, if they actually cared, they care about all sorts of other things. During COVID, they're like, oh, there's a disproportionate amount of Black people dying from COVID. We got to call an emergency. It's a state emergency. Why isn't this an emergency? And why did our governor veto money that was supposed to go toward pregnancy crisis centers? I know they hate those things. Why did she veto money that was supposed to fund like education to promote like adoption over abortion? Why? This is not a good thing. Even if you're not for abortion, why aren't you at least trying to stop so many Black children from being killed? It's a question. I don't want any of the children to be killed, but FYI, it is a huge disproportionate number. 56. So there is an issue. And I was just floored by some information that I heard of like different folks being suggested. And one person did have an abortion in the past, and they had a pretty traumatic abortion. So I was just floored. Like quietly enraged to hear that people like offered that idea. And some folks have it in their mind, even if they are Christian, we'll just do it and repent. And I'm like, but repentance means this, you're godly sorrowful. If you have premeditated sin on your mind, you are not right. You are not right with God. If that's your attitude, I'm just gonna sin and he'll get over it. Is that how you would treat your spouse? I'm just gonna cheat and they'll get over it. It doesn't sound like you respect your vows if that's the life that you live. But it's an issue. But that doesn't mean that people are unaware that it's a baby, that it's alive, because they've had babies, they've had sonograms, they've been aware of the development, they've carried these babies to term. So there's a lot of people on the pro-life side, you'll hear them talk like there's a debate with Joel Berry versus Abolitionist Rising. And the more Joel talks, it's so infantilizing towards women, as if they have no moral agency or culpability or anything. Like it's just really demeaning the more he talks. I know, and he was trying to be chivalrous and protect women, but it just the more he went, the more demeaning it was. Like, women are smarter than people are giving them credit for. It's just a cultural rot right now. It's not that people don't know that it's right or wrong. It's just like they're conditioned to this is just like a thing that you can do. It's just a thing that you can do. So a lot of people, they mentioned, see their sonograms and still, I think he said like 90 something % of people still say that they're going to go ahead and abort. And there's this really wicked video that I'll probably show you after we finish this Charlie Kirk video, of this young woman just excited, elated that the baby is dead. And it's really sad, but sometimes I say some people you cannot convince with all the facts and the data and so on. They just have to be defeated. Just like some people you could not convince them of the dignity of African Americans, of Black people in the 1800s, because they wanted their slaves and they wanted them to do the work. So they suppressed the truth that's written on their heart to be able to treat these human beings like they were subhuman, to be able, so they could own them and they could pick their cotton and do whatever. They suppressed the truth so they could commit that horror. And a lot of people are suppressing the truth. Charlie is a Christian. He's using scripture, like the law's written on their heart. They ought to know, and they do it anyway. So what's Charlie Kirk's answer here? We'll go ahead and play some of his response.
Just to be clear, maybe you should explain more to the audience of your view. You are an abolitionist, is that correct?
No, sir. So I believe that we shouldn't retroactively prosecute women, and abolitionists don't believe that either. But I believe that
some do, but I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah. So
I've heard Charlie make this claim that abolitionists retroactively believe in punishing women. That's not even like constitutional. I have seen a lot of abolitionists online. I heard a lot of them speak, heard a lot of debates and conversations. I'm not saying that there's no one out there who believes that, but I haven't heard like any, I think, prominent folks who are thought of as abolitionists say that. I could be wrong. Maybe I just haven't seen that, but I don't, I would wager that I've probably seen more abolitionist content than Charlie Kirk has. And that would be an unusual view, in a view that's just could not even be enacted when we're talking about retroactively. If we just decided that all abortions are illegal today, and if you commit one, you're going to jail. If you had one yesterday, you're not going to go to jail because it was legal at the time that you did it. And we're not going to retroactively just start throwing people in jail for something that they did while it was legal. So I've never heard someone who has a thought out worldview, I guess, around abolition. I've heard people like say that on TikTok lives of people who aren't very good debaters or thinkers. I've heard it before, but that's not like a tenet of like the abolition movement. I don't know why Hayden doesn't view himself as an abolitionist. Probably because he's, I don't know, I guess I'd have to reach out and ask him. Some people who basically hold the same views just can't hold it to the strict way that like the guys from Abolitionist Rising hold to them. So maybe there's just that kind of separation because they just can't do all this. They're sort of tenets. Maybe it's about immediatism or whatever. I'm not sure, but it'd be cool to figure that out. I guess I'll ask him to see if he responds.
I believe that we should pass a bill of equal protection that protects all human life equally from conception and doesn't give special murder rights to mothers.
I mean, at least can we agree that abortionists should first be prosecuted before anybody else? Can we agree on that?
I don't think that we should delay providing equal protection to preborn humans, and we would be delaying it by giving mothers special murder rights.
We're just not going to agree on this. I don't, regardless of all those stats, I don't think women are given informed consent when they get an abortion. I don't think they quite understand what they are doing in most cases. And I think it's also somewhat deeply destructive if we're trying to make the country more pro-life, like your opening argument being like, we want to go lock women up in jail because they got abortions, many of the time under pressure, being paid for by somebody else, so on and so forth.
So he did ask Charlie, like, what would, if these things don't change your mind, what will change your mind? And Charlie doesn't actually give an answer. He's like, regardless of the facts, my personal opinion, I know facts don't care about your feelings. Is it Charlie's? tagline. But I'm curious, what would a woman have to know in order to believe that they had informed consent when they get an abortion? And let's say they met all the parameters and they still choose to get an abortion. Would Charlie agree that that woman should, be locked up for committing that crime? If like what parameters would they have to meet? Because again, they see the sonogram, they're described of the development of the child, and some of these women have had children to term. Some women have had multiple children carried to term. That's one of the reasons why they may choose to have one, because they're like, well, I already got 2-3 baby daddies, I don't need a fourth one here. So they'll go ahead and have the abortion. Or maybe they'll have an abortion because they're past the years that they wanted to have it. They have more kids than they kind of planned to. So this was the oopsie baby, and I don't want a oopsie baby. But they've gone through the whole development. You're going to tell me a woman who's gone, an adult grown woman who's seen multiple sonograms, has felt the child moving within them and all that stuff, doesn't know what an abortion does? When there's states that make you see how developed it is, listen to read about it. Like, some people might just be clicking through it, but there are informed consent laws on the books to try to disincentivize women from having them, and they still choose to do them. So I think it's really important, which Charlie didn't lay out, what parameters do you think that they need to meet to properly have informed consent? Because a lot of people will say that it's a cultural thing, and I already admitted there's a huge cultural thing right now about abortion, particularly in the Black community and stuff, where it's just kind of built like that's an okay thing to do. It's not really, it's healthcare, it's not really murder and stuff. But they're so gung-ho on, yes, we should prosecute the abortionist. They're the ones, we should agree that we can go after them. My issue with that is they're part of the same culture. They believe that they're servicing the mother, and it's her right because it is her body. That's being affected by this child that she doesn't want. They know it's alive, and the mother knows that it's alive. They may say jargon like it's not really human, but they don't mean that it's not literally human DNA. They mean that they don't see the value in it. But the doctors themselves can, if the mother says there's no value in it, then why do they have to believe that there's value in it? They're part of the same culture. I know women who've said that they went to Planned Parenthood, they had an abortion, and they wanted to become the abortionist one day. They wanted to work at the Planned Parenthoods. So if they were depraved then, and then they become the doctors, and they were ignorant then, you think all of a sudden they're the bad guys? And then there's the issue that in most abortions now, they're done by the pill. So the woman herself is the abortionist. And so I ask the question, if a woman goes to Planned Parenthood and she has an abortion, or let's say this is a world where it's illegal or whatever. So she goes and she has an illegal abortion. Charlie Kirk would want the abortionist to be prosecuted. Let's say that abortionist is a woman. He'd want her to be prosecuted, correct? Okay, let's say that abortionist aborts her own child. If there are pro-life laws that ban abortion, except for the women who actually have the abortions, that abortionist, if she kills other women's babies, she would go to jail. But if she killed her own child, she would be free and clear. That doesn't make sense to me. So a lot of people will say that the abolitionists who want to make laws, equal protection laws or whatever, they want to pick on women. No, we want the laws applied equally. So anyone who would commit this act, be male or female, would go to jail. Anyone. It's applied equally. And there's equal protection for you, and there's equal protection for the unborn, because we're all humans we're all made in the image of God and deserving of that right to life. So I don't think Charlie is making a good case other than like an emotional one. But politically he does have an interesting point though about how Hayden is saying we should jail people, and that obviously turns people off. But I'm gonna let him talk some more and then I'll address that.
Well, that's not true. As I mentioned, only 1% of women, according to a 2004 Guttmacher study, said that their parents, partner, or husband wanting them to have an abortion was the primary reason that they did it.
Okay, I'd have to look more into that. I mean, I guess in a perfect world, if a woman gets an abortion in Michigan, what do you think should happen to that person?
Yeah, so if a bill of equal protection has already passed and didn't give the mother special murder rights, then she is willingly breaking the law by murdering her child, and she should be prosecuted for murder.
Yeah, again, I don't share that view, and that's fine. I think that the abortionist is the one doing the murdering, and in some case, the woman knows what she's doing. In many other cases, she's not given informed consent. But also, this is a little bit of a superfluous argument, because we're in Michigan where I think they just passed abortion into the Constitution, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, at some point, this is like a hypothetical argument that is so far distant. Like, maybe let's talk about first, I don't know, repealing back some of the most aggressive pro-abortion policies in our country, right?
Well,
just to be clear, your position does turn off like millions of people just from your opening salvo. That makes us seem like insanely unreasonable, as if we're like all of a sudden not going to lock up women many of the times who have no idea what they're doing in vulnerable positions. Again, I actually, as a pro-lifer, have a heart for women that get abortions most of the time. So I think they've been lied to by an abortion industry, be told that it's just a clump of cells and not a human being. Whereas I'm not trying to criticize you. The way that your approach comes across is like, let's just say, charitably very cruel to a young woman where she just hears, you know, she's going to go to jail if she gets an abortion. Do you think that
it's charitably very cruel? Okay. Yeah, people do get offended when you say, hey, you're committing murder, but when we say they're committing murder, obviously take the legality out of it. I mean, murder is a you could use it as a obviously a legal term, and right now abortion is legal in a lot of places. Some places it's not, depending on the week. But as far as it being an unjustified killing, defining murder that way, Charlie would agree that it's an unjustified killing. And he says that some women might know what they're doing. He brought up like the culture or whatever, the people lied to. It's a clump of cells. I hear people say that all the time and on different debates, and they'll have to walk the people through that to basically, they'll make that statement and they'll have to denounce it. It's just a mechanism. That doesn't mean that they literally will think that. Or even if you show them the image of the baby at, 6 weeks or something like that, they'll be like, ew, that's gross. That doesn't look human to me. And so they're still disconnecting and choosing to not see the value in that. So and the same could go for a doctor. Like I had a friend who worked at an IVF clinic some time ago, and viewing the embryos in that very beginning of life and seeing, the zygotes and so on, it made him more detached from the very early stages of life, and he didn't really see it as like life. He knows it's technically life, but he didn't place value in it because it's just like they discard them, they can die, they can, But what's really interesting to me about Charlie, like, you're really turning people off, is that Charlie is going around talking about IVF. Now, I saw in a video the other day, he didn't necessarily want to make it illegal, but he's talking about the moral implications of IVF and the moral issues with it. And that is far more controversial to me than the abortion issue. Like, if you can convince people that abortion is wrong and it should be illegal, it doesn't seem to me that it should be so hard to convince people that if they break the law and they do something that they know is illegal, that they should be punished for it. Like, if the laws go into effect and everyone is aware at the same time that if they go out of their way to find an abortion pill and to take it, or to go some back alley through a, some shady underground clinic or something to go have the abortion, or they put a hanger or something up there, if they take those steps to unalive the child, knowing that is illegal, it just doesn't seem that far-fetched to people. They'd be like, oh gosh, that's really cruel that you broke the law and now you have to be punished. Either the law is just or it's unjust. So if you can get people on board to agree to this thing needs to be illegal, I don't know, it just kind of follows that you should be able to convince people that that anyone who breaks the law should go to jail. Like maybe there's some circumstances that can arise and a jury would acquit them or something. But like blanketly, yeah, if we can convince them that it's murder and this should be legal, it should follow that if people commit the murder, they should go to jail. But trying to convince people that it's immoral, to have their IVF children, to have their precious bundle of joys. Now he has complex feelings about it. And he doesn't like the embryos being, discarded, and the eugenics behind it, like, oh, this one we're not going to use because of this, or oh, their sex selection here or whatever. Like, what about all these humans that are living, but they're just kind of frozen and their human rights being violated. Like, so he voices different concerns. I saw a video the other day of 2 twins that were born through IVF who were questioning and stuff on it. And to me, that is a harder argument than the abolition one. maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But you have a lot of pro-life people that are like, no, my friend was born through that, or my friend's child was born through that, or my child was born through that. So they have a very emotional attachment, very emotional argument, similar to a lot of people who are pro-abortion because they've had an abortion, or they have a friend who had an abortion. Just about everybody knows someone who's had one. So there's a lot of emotional arguments on both those sides. So it just kind of floors me. I mean, Charlie Kirk is against IVF. Lila Rose, very much against like the abolitionist view that they should prosecute women. Very much like women don't have the culpability, the culture has brainwashed them and so on. But she is staunchly against IVF. Very wanted to be, outlawed. And Kristen Hawkins, I believe same thing. I don't hear her talking about IVF as much, but I'm sure she has the same, opinion. Both of them, all these 3 people are Catholic. So I think the Southern Baptists and the Catholic Church have like spoken their opinions and stuff about this. So if you just want to talk about things like for political purposes, like they pick their battles. But to me, like, I understand Trump going certain routes where he thinks being pro-life is a detriment to his agenda or whatever. So he was very moderate, in my opinion, pro-choice now for the different stuff he was saying in the campaign, how they changed the Republican platform and so on. But they'll stick to their guns on certain things, like the tariffs. Screw what all these economic people have said for all of these years. He doesn't like the deficits and so on, and he wants a fair deal. And you had right wingers like Benny Johnson's, when the stock market was tanking, saying it's not that big deal if you lose money. They'll come up with whatever kind of narratives to push what they want. Donald Trump, 2020 election was stolen. Election was stolen. Yes, election was stolen, and I'm only going to support people who say that the election was stolen. I'm going to select different people to run for different offices because they said the election was stolen, and that's what happened in Michigan in 2022. Like our, ticket Secretary of State, Attorney General, they're people who did things to really push that the election was stolen, and they got the grassroots and all those folks behind him, and Trump was behind him, and they became the nominees. Tudor Dixon, I don't know if she was that vocal on it or whatever, but he'd endorsed her too. Like he picked her whole top ticket. It spectacularly failed, and then when it was over, he's like, those pro-lifers, they're just too extreme, and that's why we lost the midterms. So these people, they'll push very hard what they want until they win. Until they win, because he's back in the White House. And so I don't understand why this can't be one of those things that we fight very hard to change the culture on, and change society and change the laws, because we are talking about people being killed, human beings. That's the conversation we're having. So I understand that you have to win to be able to implement political agendas. But some people say, like, you got to be quiet because we have an upcoming election. We got the general. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm going to talk about it now. General's over. Like, oh, well, we got the midterms now. It's like, okay, well, we're always going to have another midterm, then another general, and then another midterm. Like, there's always going to be an election. So is it just that you don't want me to talk about this at all? And that is how a lot of people feel. But I just can't drop it because it's a human rights violation. And I believe that I've always been a person, and I've always had a right to be protected from violence. So I love my neighbor. I'm commanded to love my neighbor. And my neighbor includes the preborn, who I also believe are made in the image of God. And I wouldn't want someone to commit an act of violence, a deliberate, premeditated violence against me. And I don't want that to be done to someone else. It can really be that simple. But let's watch a little bit more.
That's going to make the country more pro-life, your perspective?
So a quick follow-up on that. So I would agree that we can take the political realities into account when trying to form policy and laws. So if, for example, you're in a state, and for like Oklahoma or Louisiana, where you have a pro-life majority, and you think to yourself, okay, we could pass a bill of equal protection, but if we do that, we might see a backlash in the next national election. That's a political calculation. I'm fine with people making that. But my disagreement with you is it doesn't seem like this is a political calculation, but rather a moral judgment that these women are victims and not murderers.
I actually think they are victims. We just disagree.
Okay, so what evidence could persuade you?
Well, nothing that you cited, but just anecdotally, anecdotally, which does form opinion, and I'd have to find more data. I know women that I've met that have gotten abortions almost always have a second or third party assisting, subsidizing, or notifying them in doing that. Secondly, a lot of the women that have abortions, they're filled with regret, because many of the times of the people I've met, maybe you have different experiences, they say, if I would have known the complexity of what that actually was a human life, they would have maybe made a different decision. So we just disagree. I have a different approach, and thank you for your time today. You tried to change my mind, but you did not. Thank you.
I don't think Charlie was open to having his mind changed, which Hayden, the rest of this video is Hayden like analyzing his approach with Charlie. And he says, I shouldn't have said I was going to change his mind, because that actually builds like a wall and leads to not really being able to have a great discussion or whatever. But Charlie wasn't open to, in my opinion, to having his mind changed about this in this engagement. And he gave data. Charlie, I don't know, didn't process it or didn't want to accept it anyway, and was going by anecdotals that he's aware of. There's lots of anecdotal stuff that Charlie could hear that I would hope would also educate him. But him saying that there's plenty of women who have regret and say things like, if I had known how complex or what really all this was with the baby, like, I wouldn't have made that decision. That I've heard women say that for sure. But I know that there's women who've like, there was this one girl who was a pro-life advocate. She changed. She went to college and she got knocked up by her boyfriend, and She claims that she knew she was going to have an abortion as soon as she saw that she was pregnant. But her story is pretty complicated as far as she had reached out to pro-lifers, and she claims that they didn't think that she was mentally well, and so she ended up being detained for a little bit, and so she's very upset about that. I do think there's evidence that would at least lend credibility to their belief that she was unwell. Like she had issues with she just got out of rehab for like alcohol abuse and other things like that. And they were concerned about her boyfriend too. I don't know what evidence there was to justify that or whatever, but she wrote out like a big letter, and she had all these excuses, basically how everyone else had failed her, no accountability for her actions or whatever, or anything like that. But anyway, she had an abortion. Now she's like hardcore pro-choice, but she's aware of the biology of the baby and stuff. And when you hear her talk now, it's the same kind of jargon about how they don't have sentience and this little thing, it's a clump of cells. Like literally will say the phrase clump of cells. Someone who would advocate, who used to advocate to save the child. Because when you flip your switch and you want to justify your actions, you will sink down to deep, dark levels to do that. So to counter Charlie, I have heard many women also say, because the abolitionists will ask women this, if it had been illegal, if you could have gone to jail for having an abortion, would you have risked going to jail and had the abortion? And they say no. They say no. I'm not saying there's not women out there who would try it or whatever, but I think most women would be like, yeah, I don't want to go to jail. And they'd either raise their baby and love them. If you look at data like the Turnaway study, most women who are turned away from abortion, they form bonds with their children and they don't regret not unaliving them. So they'd either do that or put the baby up for adoption. So by Charlie not wanting to seek equal justice, is he also putting more women in this position to commit this egregious harm? Obviously he is, but to also wound them so deeply because they wouldn't have made that decision if it would cost them their freedom. So I don't Charlie doesn't explain why his position is really just on the matter. He doesn't explain what would change his mind. He doesn't really refute the data. He just says, I have to look into it myself. It just one or two things. Like if he looks into it, he's going to find that most women who have abortions are grown women between the ages of 20 and 40. He's going to find that many women have abortions who've already had children. What Planned Parenthood sells? They sell the idea. Many women who have abortions, like people have in their head, they're just women who want to whore out the rest of their lives and be cat ladies or something. No, a lot of these women will go on to have families in the future. You see, like the actress Michelle Williams, who had a Golden Globe or whatever, and was thanking abortion, the access for her Golden Globe, because women can decide what kind of families they want have and when, and that she wouldn't be able to do what she did. Like Keke Palmer had an abortion, and now she has a child who she loves, and now she's all like, oh, super mom or whatever. But at the time, she didn't want that child to kind of put a damper in her career. Now she could have had her baby. She didn't need to have that abortion. Miss Keke Palmer, I can do it all. She could have did it, but she didn't want to. The idea, but that doesn't mean that they don't want babies. That doesn't mean that they hate babies. They sell the idea of planning parenthood, of having control in the matter. That's what they sell. They don't sell, we hate babies, go kill them. That's not what they sell. They sell choice. They sell control. And that is very appealing to a lot of people. There's plenty of women who go have an abortion with it intending to having another baby in the future. And they know it's a baby. Because if they want it, it's a baby. If they want it, it's a baby. If they don't, it's a clump of cells. It's the flick of the switch can be just like that. Because they suppress the truth that's written on their hearts. I know Charlie, if he really thinks about that, if he wants to think about it really hard, I think he could figure that out. But I understand that they think they're victims of the culture. But again, so are the doctors. So are the doctors. So anyway, I hope that was an interesting video. Let me show you guys this kid's screen, so in case you want to go follow him. But he's got some good content. I'm probably gonna talk about his debate with not the whole thing, but he had a debate with that Dean and Parker kid I watched the other day about abortion. That I want to talk a little bit about, but I'm not going to touch on it today. It'll be like a shorter video. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me today. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on the website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do, please consider leaving a donation on the website because it does cost a stream, run my site, all the good stuff you guys can support. I very much do appreciate it and appreciate you guys. I do recommend that you guys check out different merch that's available on blacktnews.com, like different mugs and t-shirts and so on. And I do have different books available that you guys can check out. Like, of course, God is blatantly against abortion. There's a link in the description. It'll take you to an Amazon page where you can see some of my books that I have. I have mostly fiction, though, and I recommend that you guys check them out. God bless you guys. I hope you guys have a great weekend and go to church. Go to church. Anyway, God bless you guys. See you Monday.